When people speak of monsters, they often conjure images of mythical beasts or demons from folklore. But in the quiet corners of suburban America, monsters sometimes wear human faces. This is the story of Scott Wayne Eby, a man whose darkness shattered lives and whose crimes left scars that would never heal. Eby's life did not begin as the tale of an ordinary man. Born in 1962, he grew up in Illinois, where neighbors later described him as unremarkable, the kind of man who blended into the background. But lurking beneath his seemingly mundane existence was a volatile combination of self-loathing, anger, and a propensity for violence. These traits, left unchecked, would eventually escalate into acts of unimaginable horror. Scott Eby's troubles began early. His childhood was marred by instability and neglect, fostering a deep-seated resentment toward the world. By his teenage years, he had already started showing signs of deviant behavior, petty theft, vandalism, and increasingly aggressive tendencies toward others. The legal system gave him warnings, and his family tried to intervene, but nothing seemed to stem the tide of his growing anger. By his 20s, Eby had accumulated a lengthy rap sheet, mostly for non-violent offenses. But behind the closed doors of his private life, he was cultivating far darker habits. Scott Wayne Eby was not merely a criminal, he was evolving into a predator. On May 8, 2004, a quiet Saturday evening in the small town of Wilmington, Illinois, life seemed to move at a slow, comforting pace. Families gathered around dinner tables, the hum of TV sets filled suburban homes, and the air carried the promise of spring. But for the Rodolphe family, this night would mark the end of innocence. It was just after 6 p.m. when Eby prowled the neighborhood, looking for an opportunity. He had been drinking heavily and indulging in drugs, a volatile cocktail that lowered his inhibitions and heightened his violent tendencies. He had already selected his target, 3-year-old Riley Fox, an innocent child who had no way of knowing the predator lurking nearby. Riley and her brother had spent the evening playing in their backyard. Their father, Kevin Fox, had stepped out briefly, leaving the children in the care of family members. It was a momentary lapse, one that any parent might have taken, but it was enough for Eby to strike. In a move both chillingly calculated and brazen, Eby abducted Riley from her home, carrying her off into the night. The horror that followed would haunt an entire community. By dawn, the Rodolphe family was frantic. Riley was nowhere to be found, and the local police had launched a full-scale search. The community banded together, scouring fields, parks, and riverbanks for any trace of the missing girl. Their worst fears were confirmed less than 24 hours later. Riley's lifeless body was discovered in a creek a few miles from her home. She had been sexually assaulted and drowned, her small frame left discarded like refuse. The brutality of the crime shocked even seasoned investigators, who struggled to comprehend the level of depravity required to commit such an act. In the days following Riley's murder, pressure mounted on law enforcement to find the killer. The public demanded justice, and investigators zeroed in on a suspect, Kevin Fox, Riley's own father. Kevin's calm demeanor during interviews, coupled with his decision to leave the children unattended for a brief period, raised suspicions. Under intense interrogation, Kevin confessed to a crime he did not commit, desperate to end the relentless questioning. His confession was riddled with inconsistencies, but prosecutors seized on it as the break they needed. Kevin Fox was arrested, charged, and publicly vilified. He spent 8 months in jail, his life and reputation in ruins, before DNA evidence exonerated him. The real killer, however, remained at large. For 6 years, the case of Riley Fox remained unsolved. Her family grieved, haunted by the injustice of her death and the wrongful accusation against her father. Meanwhile, Scott Wayne Eby continued his downward spiral. In 2010, Eby was serving time in prison for an unrelated sexual assault. His DNA had been entered into a national database, where it finally matched the evidence collected from Riley's case. When confronted, Eby confessed, his words devoid of remorse. He described the crime in chilling detail, recounting how he had watched the Fox family for days before deciding to strike. He had entered their home through an unlocked door, snatched Riley from her bed, and carried her to a nearby park, where he committed his heinous acts. Scott Wayne Eby was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the Fox family, His conviction brought a measure of closure but could never erase the pain of their loss. Riley's murder left an indelible mark on Wilmington, a grim reminder of the evil that can lurk in the most ordinary places. In the years since, the case has sparked important conversations about wrongful convictions, the flaws in law enforcement procedures, and the enduring need for vigilance in protecting the most vulnerable among us. The arrest and conviction of Scott Wayne Eby marked the end of a harrowing chapter for the Fox family, but it also opened the door to many unresolved questions. What drives a person to commit such unimaginable acts? Could the tragedy have been prevented? And how does a community begin to heal when faced with such a profound violation of trust and safety? Eby's confession provided a glimpse into the dark corridors of his psyche. During interviews with psychologists and investigators, it became clear that his crimes were not impulsive acts but the culmination of years of unchecked deviance and festering rage. Experts speculated that Eby's need for control and dominance stemmed from a childhood marked by neglect and abuse, a textbook case of how early trauma, left untreated, can warp a person's moral compass. Despite these insights, no explanation could justify his actions. Eby's ability to hide his true nature behind an unremarkable facade left many wondering how many others like him walk unnoticed among us. This haunting question became a rallying cry for change in Wilmington and beyond. The impact of Riley Fox's murder extended far beyond her immediate family. Neighbors who had once left their doors unlocked and allowed their children to roam freely began living in fear. Parents clung tightly to their children, their trust in the safety of their community irrevocably shaken. The town's collective innocence was gone, replaced by a pervasive sense of vigilance. Local schools and community organizations sprang into action, hosting workshops on child safety, self-defense, and the importance of mental health awareness. These initiatives aimed not only to protect the town's children, but also to educate parents on recognizing the signs of potential predators. In the wake of Kevin Fox's exoneration, the family channeled their grief and frustration into activism. Determined to prevent other families from enduring similar injustices, they became vocal advocates for criminal justice reform. Kevin and his wife, Melissa, spoke at conferences and partnered with organizations like the Innocence Project to raise awareness about wrongful convictions and the psychological toll of coerced confessions. Their advocacy bore fruit in 2013 when Illinois passed legislation mandating stricter guidelines for police interrogations, including the use of video recordings to prevent coercion. This law became a testament to Riley's enduring legacy, a life cut short but not without purpose. As the years passed, Wilmington began the slow process of healing. A memorial park was established in Riley's honor, featuring a playground adorned with bright colors and angelic motifs. For many, it became a place of solace and remembrance, a reminder that even in the face of darkness, light can emerge. Community members rallied together to support the Fox family and one another. Events like candlelight vigils, charity runs, and scholarship programs kept Riley's memory alive, while fostering a renewed sense of unity. The town's resilience became a beacon of hope for other communities grappling with tragedy. Eby's crimes also prompted broader discussions about the role of the criminal justice system in identifying and rehabilitating individuals with violent tendencies. Experts debated whether more proactive measures such as better mental health services, community outreach programs, and stricter monitoring of known offenders might have prevented Eby's descent into monstrosity. For the Fox family, these discussions were bittersweet. While they applauded efforts to create a safer society, they couldn't help but wonder how things might have been different if the system had caught Eby sooner. In the years since Riley's death, her story has inspired countless people to take action in their own communities. Parents have become more vigilant, lawmakers have worked to close gaps in the justice system, and survivors of violence have found strength in sharing their stories. For Melissa and Kevin Fox, their daughter's memory remains a guiding light. They often speak of Riley's infectious laughter, her love of dancing, and her boundless curiosity about the world. These memories, though tinged with sorrow, are a source of comfort, a reminder that even in the face of unspeakable loss, love endures. While the Fox family became the public face of the tragedy, countless others played crucial roles in the aftermath. Investigators who refused to give up on the case, journalists who sought the truth amidst a sea of speculation, and ordinary citizens who offered their support all became part of a collective effort to seek justice and healing. Their contributions, though often unsung, highlight the power of community in overcoming adversity. Together they ensured that Riley's story would not be one of despair but of resilience, love, and the enduring human spirit. Scott Wayne Eby's life sentence without parole ensured that he would spend the remainder of his days within the cold, unyielding walls of a maximum security prison. His notoriety as a child predator and murderer placed him at the bottom of the prison hierarchy, where even hardened criminals viewed his actions with disdain. Inmates who prey on children often face severe consequences within prison communities, and Eby's existence behind bars was one of isolation and constant vigilance. Eby's time in prison was marked by numerous altercations, stemming from both his infamy and his inability to blend into the rigid prison structure. Guards reported that he alternated between periods of brooding silence and sudden outbursts of aggression, a continuation of the volatile personality that had defined his life outside the system. Despite mandatory psychological evaluations, Eby showed no signs of genuine remorse for his crimes, further cementing his image as a man consumed by his own darkness. While some might find solace in the idea of Eby facing justice within the prison system, others struggled with the knowledge that his confinement could never undo the pain he had caused. For Riley's family and the Wilmington community, the focus shifted not to vengeance but to healing and ensuring that such a tragedy would never happen again. The wrongful accusation and imprisonment of Kevin Fox raised pressing questions about the reliability of law enforcement practices. How could a grieving father be coerced into confessing to a crime he didn't commit? What safeguards should exist to prevent such devastating mistakes? These questions ignited a national debate, with legal experts, activists, and policymakers joining the conversation. Kevin Fox's case became a touchstone for advocacy groups pushing for police reform. His public exoneration highlighted the dangers of tunnel vision in investigations, where the pressure to secure a conviction can override the pursuit of truth. In the years following the case, Illinois became one of several states to implement reforms aimed at preventing wrongful convictions, including stricter guidelines for evidence collection and interrogation procedures. The Fox family also pursued a civil lawsuit against the law enforcement officials who had mishandled the investigation, seeking accountability for the suffering they endured. In 2007, a federal jury awarded the family $15.5 million in damages, a record-breaking sum that underscored the gravity of the injustice. While the money could never compensate for the loss of Riley or the anguish of Kevin's incarceration, it was a symbolic victory, a declaration that the system had failed and must do better. As the years pass, the memory of Riley Fox remains a source of inspiration for all who hear her story. In her name, communities have come together, laws have been reformed, and lives have been touched. While the pain of her loss will never fade, the light she brought into the world continues to shine, guiding others toward a future where every child can grow up safe and loved. And so, in honoring Riley's legacy, we remind ourselves that even the darkest shadows cannot extinguish the power of hope. In her memory, we carry forward the fight for justice, compassion, and a better tomorrow.